pickpockets are hacking your brain, FedEx is trying to go green. You need to defend yourself with some DNS knowledge. Then Father Jim McDermott drops by to tell us about the life of a creative professional. Padre's Corner is next.
Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Padre's Corner is provided by Cashfly at CACHEFLY.com.
Padre's Corner is brought to you by The Books. Beautiful, affordable flowers, grown on an active volcano and shipped for free. For 15% off your first bouquet, visit thebooks.com/twit and use the code TWIT at checkout. That's THEBOUQS.com/twit and use the code TWIT to save 15%. This is Padre's Corner, Episode 8, recorded September 30th, 2014. Father Jim McDermott, Eartha Kitt Crazy. Welcome to Padre's Corner. I'm Father Robert Ballas, the digital Jesuit, here at Twit TV. Now, Padre's Corner is a place where we can sit down, relax, throw up our feet, and talk about the things that are important to geeks. Now, a few weeks back, Lisa and Leo got together and they said, look, we've got a lot of shows on our docket, but what about a show that doesn't get bound to a specific topic, that's not stuck in a corner? And that's where I come in. I'm going to put you through the mind of a Jesuit priest for the next hour and see if you come out sane on the other side. As is normal, let's start off with some freaking science. A few weeks back, we got to take a look at how slot machines work, specifically how they hack your mind. You see, casinos have gotten a lot smarter over the years, and it's no longer just putting you into a maze where you don't see the sun, or changing money for chips so you don't think about all the cash you're throwing away, or giving you free drinks so that you get drunk. They need to hack your brain. In other words, they have to understand how you work in order to make you continue playing. Now, what they've done is they've played with the pain threshold. There's a part of your brain that says, I'm willing to continue participating in this activity as long as it doesn't get X painful. And that X differs for every person. For some people, it's going to be losing $5. That's it. That's their limit. For other people, it's going to be losing $1,000. For still others, it's going to be dropping $1 million on the craps table. Whatever it may be, they need to figure out what that point is, because then they can dance around it to get all your cash. Well, the way that casinos have done it is they figured out how to interpret the different signals that you give it. When do you feed more money? When do you change your bet? How slowly do you press the button? And that has in turn allowed the machine to figure out how much it can milk out of you, how quickly. Well, today I want to talk about something a little bit different. It is the hacking of the mind, just of a different sort. Specifically, how do pickpockets hack your brain? Now, this is fascinating because it's really a study about how the brain works. There were a couple of researchers who looked at what pickpockets do. And actually, they went to a few legit pickpockets, also known as magicians, to figure the tricks of the trade. And what they found was that it wasn't just bumping and grabbing. It wasn't a smash and grab. It wasn't just a means of distracting you to pull stuff out of your purse, but rather it was a finely tuned study of the way that the brain removes distractions. You see, the reason why people can pickpocket you is because your brain is hardwired to remove distractions. That's how we live, and that's actually a good thing. If you were multitasking all the time, it would mean that you wouldn't pick out the one or two things that were most important to you. That could be dangerous in a world of things. But what pickpockets have done is they said, if I can give that person more stimulus than their brain can handle, if I can make them look someplace else thinking that's where the danger is, then by design the brain will ignore me. And that's exactly what pickpockets do. Now let's take you through one of the standard scams that we've heard about. The stall. This is a classic pickpocket maneuver. It's a three-person team that spots a mark. Of course, the mark is the person that they're going to steal from. What they do is they have a blocker that walks just in front of the mark, a bumper who walks just behind the mark, and then the blocker stops, causing the mark to crash into him, and the bumper walks into the mark. Now, the bumper starts arguing with the blocker about stopping, and either or both the bumper and the blocker attempt to steal something from the mark. A third team member passes the group, surreptitiously grabs the loot, and walks away. Now, you may be saying, well, that's just a distraction. But no, they're not distracting. They're focusing attention. They're trying to make you think that you're in danger. And by being in danger, you're going to tense up and you're going to focus your attention on one thing, either the bumper or the bumper or the stopper. Either one of those, if they know that they're being looked at, knows that the other person has the opportunity to steal something from the mark and pass it off to the third. It's a classic move and a really good example of how they hack the brain. Now, the important thing here, again, is that you're not necessarily just trying to distract. It's not like throwing up a bunch of firecrackers and saying, well, they're going to look at that. It's understanding the brain and psychology enough that you can focus someone's attention away from you. Now, I'm not saying that this is the end-all, be-all of crime. Most pickpockets aren't going to be this savvy. Most pickpockets, it's just a crime of opportunity. You're far more likely to get something stolen because you leave it on a counter at the library than you are to get pickpocketed on the streets of San Francisco. But yet, there's something just a little bit fascinating about those who turn the power of the mind on itself. And that's the pickpocket. Let's move from some science to some freaking engineering. Specifically, I want to talk about FedEx. FedEx is one of the ways that we get all the packages that we order on the internet. I mean, if you're on Amazon like I am, if you build a lot of stuff like I do, or if you just like getting things, you've probably ordered a few things that came through FedEx. And as a result, FedEx has an absolute fleet, a worldwide fleet of vehicles that takes them everywhere. Now, how big is that fleet, you may ask? Well, imagine this. 47,000 vehicles, 700 aircraft, all to deliver 4 million packages a day. Now, all that activity means that they've got a fuel bill that rivals the military. FedEx burns over 1.5 billion, that's with a B, gallons of fuel a year. So the idea of having more efficient vehicles isn't just a matter of being green for them, it's big money. I mean, if they can shave even a couple of percentage points off the amount of fuel that they burn each year, it means savings in the millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of dollars, and that's a good thing. Now, they're saving a lot of money right now by replacing their old 727s with 757s. They're more fuel efficient, they hold more cargo, and, you know, they're going to last longer. They're also replacing their MD-11s with 777s for the same reasons. You've got bigger, more cargo space. You've got a more dependable aircraft that runs more efficiency. They've also changed their policy. Like, for example, they decided not to run the APUs, that's the auxiliary power units, at the gate. That eliminates about 1.5 hours of engine use per flight, which, believe it or not, spread out throughout the fleet means you're saving about 1 million gallons of fuel per month. They've also done things like changing the vehicles that service the planes from internal combustion engines to electric, and that has saved another 1 million gallons of fuel per month for the fleet. But now they need something a little more. They need a way to increase their fuel efficiency, not just in the sky, but on the ground. So they've looked to trucks, specifically hybrid trucks. FedEx is now working with a Silicon Valley company by the name of Wrightspeed to create a fleet of hybrid diesel trucks. Now, the fleet, starting with 25 sold as a pilot program, use a super specialized serial hybrid design. The drivetrain has a 39 kilowatt-hour battery, which unfortunately isn't a whole lot. That should be able to power your truck, if it was loaded, for about 30 miles. It also has regen braking, which could add another 25 miles, or 2 to 5 miles. But 30 to 35 miles is not nearly enough range for a delivery truck. So it has a diesel turbine. Now, you may be asking yourself, wait, a diesel what? Yes, a diesel turbine, just like they have in the M1 Abrams, except it's a lot smaller. You see, this is not a turbine that's connected to the transmission. That would actually be incredibly complicated. You'd need a big turbine, and to connect it to a transmission would require an incredibly complicated bit of machinery that's prone to breaking. Instead, they haven't connected it in parallel, they've connected it in serial. Now, what does that mean? Well, think about the Prius. The Prius is a vehicle that has what's called a parallel hybrid system. In the Prius, you've got an electric engine, and then you've got a motor that's also tied to the transmission. If you're going under, say, 20 or so miles an hour, you'll engage the electric engine, and it will try to draw as much power as possible from that before switching on the gas engine. When the gas engine turns on, there's a physical linkage between it and the transmission, which means that you can get both the power of the electric motor and the gas engine. It sounds good, except it's inefficient. You see, electric engines operate best at near 0 RPM. Gas engines operate best near 4,000 to 6,000 RPM. That's their gold zone. So you need to try to find a way to maximize those two. And of course, you're not going to get zero anywhere near 4,000 to 6,000 RPM. What you can do with a serial hybrid is you can have the engine, the electric engine operating near its gold band and have the gas engine operating near its gold band. In this case, the turbine gets to turn at the most efficient speed possible, and the electrical engine gets the power that it needs to keep turning the wheels. Now, what does it mean for FedEx? It means that they could have a fleet of trucks that are super, super efficient. Oh, serial hybrids are, at least on paper, far more efficient than parallel hybrids. And turbine engines, again, like the ones that are found in the M1 Abrams tank, do require complicated linkages and superstrand transmissions, but since this is just connected to a generator, it doesn't. Also, in a serial setup, since the turbine can be run in the golden zone the entire time, it also means that the maintenance cost over time is far lower than a diesel engine. Now, FedEx isn't just doing pie-in-the-sky math here. They've tried it. Last year, they received 2 of these specialized trucks from Wrightspeed, and they were able to put them into the regular fleet. Evidently, they were impressed enough that they've ordered 25 more. And we know that they're a bit costly. They cost about $100,000 per refit. That's not including the price of the truck. Now, that is quite a bit of money, especially when you consider the fact that replacing the engine and the transmission would probably run you about $30,000. But what FedEx is doing is looking at the long game. And if they can reduce the amount of maintenance, if they can reduce the amount of support, and if they can reduce the amount of fuel that they suck up each year, then going green is a lot of green. Now, after the break, most of us were attacked yesterday, but we didn't even know it. That doesn't mean that we can't defend against it. But first, I want to take some time and talk about the first sponsor of Padre's Corner. Now, I know that this might be a shock for some of us, but believe it or not, most of us aren't geeks. I mean, by us, most people in the world. We're techies. I mean, we look at things in terms of blinky and energetic things, but sometimes the people that we relate to, our loved ones, our friends, our family, our mothers, our sisters, our spouses, significant others, I'm sorry, I'm not so good with those terms, need to have something other than the latest shiny, flashy, blinky things. Sometimes you need flowers. Now, if you've ever ordered flowers online, you know what little bit of hell it can be. Chances are you've been burned, because it's not just the flowers. It's the hidden charges. It's the preparation fee. It's the shipping charges. It's the upsells. And worst of all, it's flowers that don't look anything like the picture. In fact, I've received bouquets that have looked just a step up from dead weeds, and that's just not acceptable. Now, my favorite are the services that want me to make a bouquet. I mean, that's cool. I like to customize everything, but I know nothing about flowers. I know nothing about what makes things nice. I'm just as likely to pick the cheapest flowers I can and wrap it up in the cheapest bundle, and that's just no good. I want a service that's going to help me, that's going to guide me through the process so that I get the flowers that I need. And folks, we got it. That's where thebouqs.com comes in. They want to simplify the way you order flowers online. That's THEBOUQS.com. The Bouqs offers roses, lilies, daisies, and more in beautiful, colorful, and creative arrangements. TheBouqs.com sends flowers straight from sustainable, eco-friendly farms located on an active volcano in South America. Seriously, folks, volcano flowers. You're probably asking yourself, why in the world would you want volcano flowers? Well, a volcano is about 10,000 feet above sea level, which means more sun, and more sun means more color. And these volcano flowers are fed by pure volcanic snowmelt and mineral-rich soil. All of this means that their flowers are more vibrant, more beautiful, and more unique than anything you've ever seen. The Bouqs cuts your flowers on the day that you order them, and they're shipped straight from the farm, so you get the freshest bouquet possible. All orders are backed by the Bouqs Happiness Guarantee, and you can sign up for the Bouqs Concierge Service. This is the part that I really like. You can arrange for the Bouqs to automatically deliver flowers on birthdays, anniversaries, or just because. In other words, these aren't just beautiful flowers, they're relationship insurance. Best of all, the pricing is upfront and the checkout process is painless. So here's what we want you to do. We want you to send your loved ones incredible flowers grown on an active volcano. Just visit thebouqs.com/twit. That's thebouqs.com/twit. The Bouqs start at $40 and you can double the number of blooms for just $10 more. And you'll save 15% off your first bouquet by entering the code TWIT at checkout. Plus, get free shipping within the United States. That's THEBOUQS.com patreon.com/twit. And we thank the Books for their support of Padre's Corner. I've actually already set up a concierge service for my for Mother's Day and Valentine's Day for my sister and my female loved ones in my family. I've been really bad about sending flowers in the past, and you know what? I'm going to just try it this year, see if I get a different response than, oh, it's you. Now, believe it or not, folks, you have been the victim of a vicious attack. That's right. If you were on the internet at all yesterday, you were being attacked even though you didn't know it. There was an attack en masse coming out of Asia against some of the major DNS, that's the domain name service servers across the world. The DNS system is what allows us to resolve numbers and names into one another so that when I type www.twit.tv, I actually get to the Twit TV servers. Well, a group of enterprising hackers, or more likely just hackery trolls, decided that they were going to try to bring down DNS servers around the world. Most of the time, they didn't succeed. The DNS system is hardened enough, but there were carriers, Comcast, Verizon, Sprint, AT&T, that did have issues in certain parts of the country. And there were several nations that had internet access that was squishy for 3 or 4 hours. However, it doesn't have to be the case. You don't have to be vulnerable to those DNS attacks, to those hackery attacks, to those script kiddies. That's why we're going to talk about DNS in the tech. DNS stands for Domain Name System, and it's how your computer finds things on the internet. You see, if you open up a browser and type www.google.com into the address bar, that in and of itself doesn't actually mean anything to any of the routers that route traffic on the internet. They need an actual IP address, that address that tells them where to send packets, where it should go, and to what router it should go next. The way it works if you actually type google.com into your address bar is that you go through what's called the domain name system. You see, your computer will query a DNS server and ask it for the IP address of the server that you've requested. In the case of google.com, the DNS server would look up google.com and find that it relates to an IP address of 74.125.239.41. It can then stamp the packets with that address, and those packets go off into the internet through the routers to the final destination of Google, where it's responded to and then sent back to you. Bing, bang, boom, instant Doge video. The problem is that it doesn't always work that way. You see, not all DNS servers are created equal. Some, like the ones run by less diligent ISPs, may be a little bit oversubscribed. Too many subscribers, too many people hitting them, and that means that they're not as reliable and they're a little slow to respond. Now, if they're slow to respond, if they're slow to convert that google.com into the IP address, that means your packets don't go out as quickly. If your packets don't go out as quickly, it means they don't get routed as quickly. If they don't get routed as quickly, it means that you don't get responded to as quickly. And that means so frustration, much slow, bad Doge. Wow. If you want to know how fast your DNS server is running, I suggest using Steve Gibson's DNS benchmarking tool. The link will be in the show notes. His software will allow you to benchmark over 200 DNS servers at a time, giving you a pretty good idea of how your DNS server stacks up. What we're looking for is a combination of reliability and low response time. It's going to vary from region to region and user to user, but most of us, I would bet, are going to find that the ISP server is not the fastest one that we can access. You've probably even noticed it before. You know when you typed in an address into the browser window and then you waited and waited and waited and waited until finally you got so fed up that you retyped it or hit enter. Or maybe that time that it seemed like a resource, a server was unavailable, and then miraculously it popped back the next moment. Well, in all likelihood, that was a DNS problem. Luckily, you don't have to live with a slow DNS server. You can, and you probably should, change them to increase your performance, your reliability, and even add a couple of non-performance security-based advancements. But you need to find out where your DNS settings live. Now, it's going to be different from operating system to operating system, so I'm going to show you how to do it in two different ones, Windows 7 and OS 10. Now, the instructions I'm giving you will also work for Windows 8 but you're going to have to figure out how to do it with that weird, new, modern UI. Meh. In Windows 7, go to Start, Control Panel, Network and Sharing Center, then click Local Area Connection. You'll get a pop-up window for Local Area Connection status. Now click Properties. Select Internet Protocol version 4 and click Properties once again. Towards the bottom of this new window, you'll see an option to use the following DNS server addresses. Enable that selection and then type in your two favorite DNS servers. My personal choices are Google's DNS server at 8.8.4.4 and OpenDNS at 208.67.222.222. Select OK, close, and you're good. Your computer will now use those third-party DNS servers instead of your ISPs. Now, quick note, the instructions that I just gave you will add the third-party DNS server to the wired connection. But if you have multiple connections on your computer, say the wired, maybe a second wired, a dual LAN, or a Wi-Fi connection, you're going to have to change the settings in those connections as well. In Mac OS X, you need to go into the System Preferences and select Network. You select the connection that you want to configure, be it Ethernet or Wi-Fi, then select Advanced. Choose the DNS tab, and at the bottom of the DNS servers box, you'll find the plus sign, which will allow you to add your own DNS server configuration. Add as many DNS servers as you'd like. In my case, I'm adding Google and OpenDNS. Then click OK and Apply. I know that some of you want the convenience and the performance of having a third-party DNS server, but without the hassle of having to put those settings into every device that you own. So if your router is even a little not crap, you can change the settings of the DHCP server built within the router to automatically give those settings to every device that comes onto your network and requests an address. I know that sounds like a lot of technobabble, but stay with me. Log into your router and find the section that controls the DHCP settings. You should see fields that allow you to define static DNS servers. If you input your preferred DNS servers here, devices that connect to your network will automatically be given those DNS settings. Now, granted that it's easier to do this method because the settings are automatically inherited by any device that connects to your network. But the advantage of hard-coding the DNS server information is that you keep it, no matter what network you're connected to. So even if you're not at home, if you're at a public Wi-Fi network, or if you're in say a campus network, you'll always have the advantage of that third-party DNS. Now, for those of you whose browsing habits are, let's say, more defined, and by more defined, I mean that you use the same 10 to 20 sites over and over, there is one little trick that you can use to speed up your DNS resolution even more, and that involves editing your host file. Both Windows and OS X computers have a host file that allows you to map or hardcode a name to an IP address. That means that when you type that name into your browser, your computer doesn't have to go to a DNS server to resolve it because the IP address is contained within that host file. For Windows 7 users, the process is straightforward. First, open Notepad in administrative mode by going to Start, All Programs, Accessories, then hover your mouse over Notepad and right-click. From the drop-down menu, choose Run as Administrator. You'll be asked to verify that you want to allow the program to make the changes to your computer. Go ahead, accept, and continue. Now open a file with Notepad and navigate to the folder with the hosts file. You can find it at My Computer, C, Windows, System32, Drivers, etc. You need to make sure that Notepad is seeing all files by clicking on the selection box next to the file name field and selecting all files. You will now be able to see the host file. Open the host file and go to the bottom of the file. Add your DNS entry in the following format: IP address, tab, and then the URL. I'm going to enter the IP address of 74.125.239.41 and then give it the value of google.com. Repeat this process for all your favorite websites, remembering that the easiest way to get the IP address of a server is to use the integrated ping command. Go to Start and open a command shell by typing CMD into the Search Programs and Files bar and hitting Enter. Now type ping and the name of the site for which you want the IP address. For example, irc.twit.tv. The ping tool will return the value of 174.37.23.130 in our example, and I can now put that value into the host file next to irc.twit.tv.
The fun thing about this method is that you don't have to put a real site, or you could readdress a site that actually exists. For example, I'm going to use the Google IP address of 74.125.239.41 and the made-up URL of crankyhippoisabaddoge.com, as well as the irc.twit.tv IP address of 174.37.23.130 and the value of a.tv. Now when you go to a browser and type crankyhippoisabaddoge.com, it will direct to google.com, and a.tv will end up at the Twit IRC channel. I should note that this will definitely speed up your resolving, but remember that you've now hard-coded those IP addresses to those URLs. If the IP address ever changes in the real world, you will no longer be able to reach those servers until you update the host file or just remove those IP addresses from the host file altogether. Also, some servers don't respond on their default pinged IP address, so you really want to try and make sure that all the servers you need to reach, you can actually reach. For users of OS X, the host file can be found in the private/etc folder. Just hit Command-Shift-G, then type /private/etc and hit Enter. You can use your command line-based editor of choice like Pico, Nano, or VI, and remember that the same format and rules apply as to Windows. Follow these simple steps and DNS will no longer be the Achilles heel of your internet experience.
I know that was a lot of information. I'm really, really sorry. There was no better way to do it. But believe it or not, once you take control of your DNS, you're going to be so happy with what you can do with your computer. Oh, and by the way, if I may mention to all the pranksters out there, if you use the host file on either Windows or Mac, you can redirect someone's website, their favorite website, to something else, and they won't be able to fix it if they don't know how to edit it back. I'm not saying you should do that. I'm just saying that you could. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I want to welcome to the show, my favorite part of the show, by the way, because it means I get to talk to a guest, a friend of mine, and someone who has actually done a lot of work in creating content, both for the internet and for cable TV. It's Father Jim McDermott. Jim, thank you very much for coming on to Padre's Corner.
Thanks for having me.
Now, we've known each other from way back. I think the first time we met was in Chicago when we were both studying philosophy, right?
Yeah, it's a long time ago, like in the 90s.
In the 90s, we used to play basketball against each other, and you can vouch for this. And in fact, I need you to vouch for this because the people in my audience don't believe me. Back when we were in Chicago, I weighed about 135 pounds.
Oh yeah, you were a skinny dude, and I assume you still are. They say that the camera puts on like 50 pounds or something like that.
Yeah, and there's like 40 cameras in this place, so I mean, right? I'm still doing good. I'm all right. I'm okay.
By the way, on that the DNS part of your show, I loved the Doctor Who in the background. I was pouring one out for Handles and Trenzalore, and it was pretty awesome.
I just rewatched that episode, and because I actually didn't really like it the first time around. I was like, it felt so forced, and they were trying to tie up loose ends. But after putting it down and sitting down and going through the entire season again, it's actually a pretty damn good episode. It's almost picture perfect, especially after the Day of the Doctor.
Yeah, those three. What is it? It's a Night of the Doctor, Day of the Doctor, Time of the Doctor. Is that what it is?
No, it's
not. What's the first one? The one with
Time of the Doctor, Day of the Doctor, Night of the Doctor.
One.
Yeah. The one with the webisode, right? The webisode you're thinking about?
No, I'm thinking of the one with the first one where we see Trenzalore, the last episode of the regular season.
Oh, right. Okay, yes. The one with the intelligence, the great intelligence.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. The name of the Doctor, the Day of the Doctor, the Night of the Doctor. Thank you.
Exactly.
There we go. Now, it was a really damn good episode, and Handles. I love how they work that in because do you remember the tower? So when they were in the tower in the previous episode on the Day of the Doctor, right?
Yeah.
London. Handles is in there.
Is that right? Is that where he comes from?
Well, no, that's because remember that actually happens after this is a time traveling arc. So if you rewatch that episode, you'll see Handles in the archive.
Oh.
Yeah, it's funny. I didn't notice that until I rewatched the series again. I'm like, oh, wait, whoa, it's Handles.
Yeah, Stephen Moffat.
I know exactly. Well, we'll
He's
talk
amazing.
about him later on. Well, I like his stories, but there's a lot of hate going on because he seems to do the same thing with his enemies all the time, which is he makes great enemies like the weeping angels, and then he turns them into a running joke.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see that, actually. I can see that.
Okay. But okay, we'll talk about Doctor Who later on. We're going to geek
Right.
out. But first, we got to let our audience know who you are. So you are a Jesuit. Let's get that out of the way. You are a Jesuit priest. So like me, you have been ordained in the Catholic Church, and you're serving the Society of Jesus down in Los Angeles. You actually live at Loyola Marymount University, yes?
I do, in fact. Yep.
Okay. And let me ask, how did you become a Jesuit?
Well, it's funny. I went to a Catholic school in Milwaukee, a Catholic university called Marquette, which is a Jesuit school. But I didn't know that. I went to public school growing up. I just knew that I liked the campus, to be honest. It was in downtown Milwaukee. I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago. So just being in an urban environment and not being too close to home, but not too far away was like a good thing for me. But then I think how I became a Jesuit's a lot like what you were talking about with pickpocketing. It's the Jesuit version of a stall. You have like the one Jesuit you meet who's like a really nice guy and engaging and wants to listen. And, as I was getting near the end of college, trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. And then you've got he brings on another guy who's like the opposite, who's like cynical and sarcastic and in some ways more attractive. And between the two of them, suddenly you're sitting in the vocation director's office saying, yeah, no, sign me up. So that's kind of how it happened. I went to Marquette. I did a year of grad school in English, and then I entered the Jesuits.
All right. And you've been paying for it ever since.
Ever since, yeah. I keep trying to find my wallet. It's crazy. They never give you the wallet back. That's part of the whole deal. Yeah.
Now, there have been a couple of questions about this whole Jesuit thing, and actually this is a really good time to talk about it. We're not going to get super religious. We're just going to answer a couple of questions that people have about Jesuit life, about community life.
Yeah, sure.
The biggest one I always get, especially since I work with technology a lot, is, if you took a vow of poverty, why are you surrounded by blinky, expensive things? And it's that difference between an abject poverty and a poverty of stewardship. How do you explain when your friends ask you how it is you can have a MacBook and whatever other tools you need for your work? How do you explain to them how that's okay?
Yeah, I mean, I always say you got to check the fine print, and the fine print, lots of loopholes. No, I say I put it probably in pretty similar terms to what you're saying, that that the vow of poverty is about availability, which is to say that it's about making your whole life available to the needs of other people. And that means that you have the stuff that will help with that, but it can also be taken away, not usually not literally, like they come and say, no, you don't get to have this computer anymore, but more like you might go on an assignment where all those books that Jesuits like myself love to collect, like a book you read 20 years ago and it was important, but you have to keep it even now. Like you might get to a point where it's like, that's just really not going to work anymore. You're going to get sent somewhere else to a mission somewhere where you're not going to ship 50 boxes. And so for me anyway, and I've had to move a lot, there's a constant process of like acquiring and then letting go, acquiring and letting go. It's binge and purge, if you will, but in a more spiritual way.
Right. One of the funny things that I always get is, but you're rolling in it, right, with all the donations and, of course you're nonprofit, but there's a cash flow. One of the common things that we both have, even though we technically belong to different provinces, and let's not even get into the governance of the society, but we belong to different provinces. We answer to different provincials, but it's the same thing in that our communities receive our salaries. So whatever salary we may get goes to the community. That community pays for anything that needs to happen in the community. So, repairs, and if they have cars, it pays for gas and insurance, et cetera, et cetera. But then the remainder either gets sent off to the province or, as is the case in most of our apostolates, gets reinvested into the apostolate. So, for example, the school I used to work in Los Angeles, we would typically return about 50% of all the salary that we got in to the school, and the school would give it as scholarships for non-privileged students. And I think that's actually pretty common. I think that goes through most of our high schools, most of our universities. But like you were saying, we've both been in assignments where we have things. Like when you're studying, the Jesuits make sure you have everything you need to study, the books and the computers. But then you worked on the res, and I worked in Bolivia. And in both cases, I brought nothing with me. I had a backpack with some clothes in it. That was it. And everything else just I had to come up with while I was down there.
Yeah, it's funny, so I've been in Los Angeles for 4 years now. I came here to do a screenwriting program at UCLA, and then I've stayed and tried to do some work in writing. And I always find that the longer you're at a place, that's where things get complicated, because there's no pressure on you to get rid of stuff. It's more like the only pressure is, can it all still fit in my room? So, I like books, I like comic books, and I'm finding no, you've got to either stop buying or start getting rid of, because it just becomes too much, and sort of maybe contrary to the vow. And I find my life's easier when it's simpler. It's when there are fewer things, in a sense, maybe fewer distractions in a way.
Yeah. Actually, we talked about that last week, about simplifying lives. Well, there was a story about a professor in Texas who is living in a dumpster. He converted a dumpster to see how small of a space he could live in. And it's radical simplicity, but at the same time, I'm thinking, yeah, all my stuff would fit in a dumpster. When I actually move from place to place, yeah, it would fit. And we've got, I'm sorry, I think it was CR1 in the chat room wanted to know if our different provinces are like the different teams in the NFL. That's pretty dang close. Each of our provinces has their own president and owner, and we all play for him, I guess. And like our two provinces, my team would be like the 49ers, and his team would be like the Oakland Raiders.
Maybe the Bears. Why don't we,
okay. No. Let's not go there. Let's not go there. Okay. No. Okay. Let's get off of this. Let's talk about something else. And specifically, I want to talk about how you got into content creation, because that's your thing. For the longest time, as long as I've known you, you've had a desire, a great interest in making content, in storytelling, and you've done some wonderful work. But what brought you to that?
That's a good question. I'm always trying to figure that out. I think I worked on this Indian reservation in South Dakota. That's, part of a Jesuit's formation is like a teaching assignment. And I did 3 years on this Indian reservation. And it was so different than anything I knew growing up. It was even though it's within the context of the United States, it's a very different culture. Some of it's very hip hop and kind of urban, and some of it's very rural, and some of it's completely specific and unique to the reservation that I worked on, this place called Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. And I don't know, I think it was when I was working there that I began to see, being a Jesuit, you get all these amazing experiences. I get to see and meet so many different kinds of people, and it just began to feel to me like, this isn't meant for me. It's not supposed to be cool, I got to spend time on an Indian reservation, and that's something cool that I did. That should be something, there should be a way of giving that to other people, of sharing, whether it's those experiences or the little glimpses of what it means to be a human being, I guess, that I gained from that. So then it was a matter of just trying to figure out, well, what does that look like? I worked at a magazine that the Jesuits run called America for about 4 years in New York City, and continue to write for them. But I always had this inclination that if I could, I would try to do something even crazier, try to do writing for TV or feature writing, maybe theater, something like that. So it's been a very zigzaggy path. I wouldn't say that even now, it's not totally clear, everything makes sense and it'll be just like this. It's sort of, I just keep trying to find my way.
Right.
If that makes sense.
We've got a common experience here in that both of us are kind of working in apostolates that they're definitely not considered traditional. I mean, when you think about a priest, you wouldn't think of someone screenwriting for TV or doing shows for an IPTV network.
Yeah, that's true.
And I don't know about you, but I run into resistance a lot. And I'm not talking about from the resistance of the audience. I mean the resistance of other Jesuits and Catholics and Christians who kind of look at me and go, why would you do that? Do you feel that at all? I mean, do you get that response sometimes?
Yes, absolutely. I would say it's interesting. Since I've come here, even in New York, that I haven't had so much trouble with Jesuits in the communities that I've lived. I haven't really, in terms of what I'm doing. But I would say what surprised me is at times when you're helping out at a parish or something and the people don't know you and then they talk to you afterward and they say, well, where do you work full time? So I'm a writer. And then sometimes I've been surprised at kind of the strong reaction, the frustration, which I've kind of interpreted as there are so many needs in the church. There are so many parishes that need priests. Why in God's name would you waste your time doing that when you could be doing what we need you for? That's the best interpretation I can put to it. But it is sometimes a little unsettling to be kind of it can be. I find I'm surprised sometimes at the negative, how strong the reaction is. Yeah.
Yeah. No, actually, and the funny thing is that's not just us. That's typically our order. Our order does a lot of that. And actually, we got a question from Web 8003 in the chat room. Cool. He specifically asked, well, then what is the difference between a Jesuit and a quote-unquote regular priest? And I say quote-unquote because there's no regular priest. There are diocesan priests.
Sure.
And maybe you want to take that.
Yeah, sure. So
explain what the whole Jesuit thing means.
So one thing that people will say about Jesuits is that they're often hyphenated priests, so that they are rarely guys whose full-time work is in a parish, but instead it'll be like, I am a teacher, hyphen priest, or I am a writer, priest, or a social worker. That they often kind of find God in a place other than the sort of traditional parish setting. That's where they find the Spirit that's where they're looking for the Spirit anyway and trying to take the lead.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Oh, yes. Oh, and by the way, JJ to the 4884, yes, Pope Francis is a Jesuit. We like to reinforce that just so people know.
Yeah, he is. That's right.
And actually, user 8003 had another good question. He said, wait a minute. I'm sorry, that was someone else. Side of fries. Hollywood letting a Jesuit priest write scripts for movies and TVs. How is that even possible? I mean, does that even become a question? Do people look at you sometimes and go, what are you doing here?
Not as much as you think. I just want to say that I think that the name Side of Fries and Hodor, those are my two favorites on the list, but Side of Fries is definitely by far my favorite. So well done, you. When I came out here, I applied to a bunch of different schools and thought for sure that being a priest would be a huge obstacle to getting in. That people would be immediately concerned, like, am I closed off? Am I misogynist, or am I homophobic? Anything. Am I going to be uncomfortable if people swear? That I just figured that those would be burdens or obstacles I would have to deal with. The strangest thing has been, it's been the opposite. Like, I'm constantly sort of asking people, why do you like me? Or why aren't you worried about these things? But I would say the one challenge is that people, like, now that I'm out of school, there can be an easy assumption that I'm a priest, so what I would want to write is the priest version of CSI. Which actually I would love to write that. I don't know what the heck that looks like, but there'd be like.
Do you actually have people say, oh, okay, so you're a priest, you need to write the priest version of Aqua Teen Hunger Force? Is that how that works? Has anyone actually approached you with that idea?
This is the first, but I'm going to write it down. I think there's something there. No, but I do I have definitely had people assume that what I have to offer is sort of priest stuff, whatever that means. But, like, I do write shows that involve priests or religious concepts, but I also write, shows about the end of the world, which I'm super fascinated with. Or, I would love to try to write a superhero movie. Haven't really succeeded at that. I wrote a movie about the Indian reservation that I worked on. It didn't have any Catholic characters or priests. It wasn't about any of that kind of stuff. So for me, I don't like to be pinned down by and large. So I'm hoping that whatever I'm able to accomplish out here, that it's broad enough that people don't see me. They don't put me in that box. They'll put me in some box because that's kind of how it works. But hopefully it's not like, well, we need a guy who can write about confession. Like, yeah, okay. I mean, I can do that. Hopefully I can do that well, but I think I have more to offer than just that.
Yeah. Actually, Side of Fries, you're one of your favorite names here. wonders about you serving as a religious advisor for any TV shows or movies. And I laugh because you actually do live with someone who does that. Or wait, maybe he doesn't live there anymore.
Eddie?
Who?
You talking about Eddie?
No, not Eddie.
Oh, Bill Fulco,
yeah.
sure.
Is Fulco still there?
Yeah, of course he is.
Yeah, he used to be, he was religious advisor to Passion of the Christ. And also, he was helping Vin Diesel. Vin Diesel wanted to do that Hannibal movie.
I had no idea.
Did I say something I wasn't supposed to say?
Oh no, I'm going to get him to talk about it now. Yeah.
Okay, actually, that's a good segue here because I know I'm not going to get you in trouble. It's hard to become a writer in Hollywood. It's exceptionally hard. You could have the best script ever, and if you don't have a way in and you don't have an angle, people will just ignore you.
Yeah,
so the fact that you've got some success, I don't want to take it away. So please don't talk about any of the projects you're currently working on or that you can't talk about. But what is it like? How do you develop content? How do you pitch a show? How do you pitch an episode and say, this is how I think this should play out?
So the way my experience so far has been mostly in trying to pitch an original idea for a show. And I had some training in that at UCLA, actually. I had a great teacher named Channing Dungey who works for ABC, who just it was a quarter-long class. They have a 3-quarter system there of basically developing an idea to the point where and then having to pitch it to 3 executives, then working on it again for 6 more weeks or whatever, and then pitching it to 3 more. And it was a great experience. A lot of it is, and this isn't easy for me, it's about getting to the nugget. It's like sound bites. Who is character X? Tell me who he is in 10 words and make me remember him. And kind of working your way through the characters and the events of the first episode of the pilot. Generally in a pitch, which might be 12 minutes of you talking and then conversation, you're going to tell like, what's the basic idea of the story, who are the characters, and kind of what's the sense of the pilot, and then maybe a couple other episodes, which probably sounds like, how do you do all that in 15 minutes? It's not always easy, but it's amazing. Some people are really good at it. So
that fascinates me because I think a lot of us have this idea of what a pitch looks like in Hollywood. And the pitch is you find a producer parking his car and you run up to him and you say, okay, I've got a script for you. It's like the Terminator meets the honeymooners on Mars and it's Survivor. You know, you've got this idea that you have to get them in the first 5 seconds. Is it really that bad? I mean, what does a pitch look like for you?
I mean, I think there is some of that. I think you want to hook them right away. The first things you say, for better and for worse, the people that I've met are hearing, tons of pitches all the time, which means that on the one hand, they've heard everything and are probably easily bored. And on the other hand, they know how it works. So that could mean that they're patient with you a little bit. It also means if you can show, I guess, like a certain amount of passion and excitement and personal connection to the material, that they're with you. Like the people that I sold a pitch in April, and it was the first time, it was my first experience of any of that. And the people I pitched to were amazing. I actually felt at the end like, I don't necessarily care if this goes any further, but they were such great listeners and had such great sort of story-based, character-based questions, which is what you want. As a writer, I think, like, you want to sell something, you want to make money, but at the end of the day, it's about more spiritual kind of stuff. It's about characters and things that are close to the heart, and you want to be telling that to people that can appreciate that. And to have the people that I did hearing me out was amazing, like a truly amazing experience.
Wow. Okay. But not a lot of people get that. I mean, I know people who have been living in Los Angeles their entire lives, 30, 40 years, and they've pitched after pitch after pitch, and they get nowhere.
Yeah, I can totally see that, actually. I've gotten really lucky. Like, one of the things I've learned, I think, is that you think there's one way in. Like, if I do this internship or if I win this contest, or you see other people that have made it in and you think, well, how did they do it? But everyone's way in is totally different, which is kind of unsettling because it means, like, you could be on the right path and not even know it, or you might be totally, you always feel, I always feel like I'm wandering in the wilderness. Like, even now, like I'm writing this pilot and I'm, you want it to be the best you can, but you don't really know. You don't know if it's up to snuff or if you're producing in the way that people expect. So I definitely appreciate, I have gotten really lucky. I did an internship that kind of turned into being able to pitch to this network. And it's insane. Like that never happens to anyone. And I just like, it's all about the people there having some faith in me and me working with really good producers to try to present something that might be attractive to them. I don't know. It is a really challenging process. And even once you've kind of sold something, it winnows away at you in a way. And yeah, it's challenging. It's really challenging.
I've talked to a couple of authors before, and a few who actually have incredibly successful books, and they've all said the same thing, which is right before they got successful, they talked to someone, be it an editor or a producer or someone else, who said, "Listen, give me your baby. I'm going to mangle your baby. You're going to hate what I do to it, but it's going to make it sell. It's going to make it more pitchable." And every single one of them has said, and after that, I'd sold. And it's that whole idea of you can't see the flaws in the thing that you've created because you created it. Do you see that? I mean, is that part of your creative process where you have to be able to hand it off to someone and just see them draw the red line through it and say, oh, this is okay, this is part of it?
Yeah, in fact, I mean, one of the things that at UCLA, you're there 2 to 3 years for 3 quarters. Every quarter, you're writing a script. You're either writing a pilot or a feature, like a 120-page, 90 to 120-page script every quarter. And most of those classes, the way they work, you're presenting material every class that is being read in the room and then getting reactions. So if you're not comfortable with feedback, then it's a nightmare. It's a total nightmare. But I kind of like it. I mean, I'm not always good at it. There's certainly times when I'm holding close to something that I need to let go of. But so usually what I find, like with the producer I'm working with, the first set of notes after a new draft are devastating. Just like, it just is like getting punched in the face, or like over and over. And then I'm supposed to just be like, excellent, and walk away and deal with it. But the next day, it really is usually like 24 hours. And then the next day it's like, okay, here are 15 ideas based on the notes that she gave me. It's like, the process starts again. And honestly, it's funny. I just showed this draft to a friend of mine, and I haven't looked at it in a while because we're kind of waiting on the network to give notes. And I just wanted to see what a friend thought of it. And he had like, basically in a really polite way, his note was, the middle of this is boring. Nothing happens. And I was like, that's like that. I've worked on that for months, and the network wanted that. And then I'm rereading it and I'm like, oh, wow. Yeah. Some of that's probably true. And we'll see what the network says. It's really for them to make those sorts of calls. But yeah, so there's always, it's painful, but then it's exciting because you see like you were too close to it. And now you see like, oh my gosh, there's so much to change, but so many new possibilities that might emerge.
Yeah. And I think anyone who has any creative endeavor, be it writing or acting or producing, is going to have that moment where the thing you worked really, really hard on, it's junk. It has to be thrown away if you're going to go any further. It hurts.
Yeah,
it hurts.
It's like a fine line. Sometimes that happens. I'm still learning it. I'm still really new at all this. But sometimes that happens and you're not dealing with the right people. Like somebody I was working with at one point, I had this feature that I really loved. And I had no presumption that it was already ready for the Oscars or even to be produced. But I knew that there was something really important in it. And I had people telling me that. And this guy who was more advanced in the business and wanted to work with me in a more long-term way, he wouldn't read it. And I said, well, why not? Oh, because you did it in school. And whatever you produce now, or the next thing you produce, will be so much better than this. And, or people who will read your stuff, it's happened to me a little bit, where people will read your stuff, but the kind of notes they give, like, they just don't respect it. it may be terrible. It may be as terrible as they say, but there's a way of kind of broaching that, and there's a way that's more like, I'm not making any money off this, forget about it. And you have to learn like how to figure out who's who, and to get rid of the people, to not work with the people that are that way, because they are so hard on your confidence. They'll break you down really quickly, and not in a good way.
Are you making a little black book of all the people you're going to get back when you become rich and famous? Is that what's going on right now?
My Jesus hit list. Yeah, absolutely.
It's like, when you're coming to me for a job at my studio. All right. I did promise you that we were going to get some time to geek out a little bit, and I definitely want to geek out with you because, like me, you're into sci-fi. You like Doctor Who. You like comic books. You like popular shows. What's your current passion? What's your addiction?
In terms of which category? All of the above?
Yeah, give me like the number one thing that you must watch. You must not have not missed. I think that's right.
That's a good question. Well, The Walking Dead will be like that come October. Right now, actually, it's probably Doctor Who. There's a new Doctor. If you're into the show, they changed the actor who's the Doctor, and it's really different than the last guy. And I really loved Matt Smith. But I'm fascinated. I'm surprised at how successful they've been at bringing out this guy who's older and kind of a jerk and kind of scary. In fact, I think that scarier he is, the better it ends up being. So yeah, I'm definitely geeking out on that. Have you been watching the new Doctor?
I watched the first episode. I don't watch until the entire series is available, then I binge. Okay. I have no problem hearing about it, but because you could tell me what happens in the episode. I'll still want to watch it. I'm sorry?
I'm just going to spoil the crap out of it.
No, you can't spoil me. You could tell me what happens at the end of a movie, and I will still go watch the movie because knowing the end does absolutely nothing to change the delight I take in watching the craft. But with Doctor Who, it is funny to see how they progress because when they brought back the new series, the first Doctor, who was actually Ninth Doctor?
The Ninth? Yeah.
Ninth Doctor. Who was Christopher?
Ninth.
Ninth, thank you. He was crotchety. He was supposed to be the War Doctor. And then they moved over to Tennant, and it was sort of like a younger teenage Doctor. And then Matt Smith was like the manic little kid Doctor. And they could have gone even younger and sillier, but instead they went the exact opposite direction. And they got Capaldi, and Capaldi is that grumpy old man who you could actually see him leaving someone to die. You really could. If push came to shove, you could see him saying, "No, I'm sorry, this is more important." That's like it's like meeting someone that you've known for a long time, but now you don't know how he's going to act.
There's a thing that they're doing with this new guy. In the first episode, I think it happens. He interprets why he's been looking so young in the prior two Doctors. Actually, it happens in the 50th special as well. And basically, the idea being that they were so ashamed after what they did to Gallifrey and the Daleks that their only way of coping was to adopt these sort of buoyant, everybody loved me kind of personalities. And that the new guy is sort of, that's all over now. And the new guy is saying, no, we're going to be an adult. And this is how, we're not going to play these games where I try to charm you into loving me for some reason that I have, which I think is fascinating. In fact, when they talked about it in the first episode of the new season. And then I went back and watched some of the Matt Smith episodes and was like, he is like that. He's totally using people so that he feels better. It was completely messing with my head, which I love. I love that something you've seen and you think is so familiar can be totally turned on its head and you see a different part of it. It's I'm a big fan of Moffat. I know he doesn't do everything perfectly. He does it a lot better than I would. And I always find him able to find new concepts and kind of fun stuff in the whole Doctor Who universe.
And every time they changed the Doctor, and this was back in the old series, every time they changed the Doctor back then, I said, I'm not going to like this new guy. That last one was, that was it. And actually for Christopher, I was kind of happy that Christopher left. I didn't really like him as the Doctor, but I loved Matt Smith, and I really liked David Tennant. He was really, really, he is probably still my Doctor, but I gotta admit, from what I've heard about Capaldi's episodes, because the first one, to be completely honest with you, I didn't really like the first episode.
Yeah, it's better on a rewatch, but I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
I was surprised. I went to the movie theater to see it.
I should have done. I totally wanted to do that.
No, don't. It was not a good experience. It was like, oh no, because it's not an episode with a lot of laughs. It's in some ways not an episode with a lot of adventure, and so the whole audience was just sort of sitting there waiting, like, when is this going to get good? But I found watching it again on my computer, like on a smaller screen, then there was stuff that was really interesting. But it was too long. They shouldn't do those. It should never go more than 60 minutes, a Doctor Who episode. And it was probably 70, 72, and it just felt long. Yeah. So yeah, I'm excited. I mean, I want to be excited about the new TV season, but I can't say the first week was rough. I thought, I was just like, wow, there's almost nothing here that's new other than the How to Get Away with Murder. There's nothing here that I'm going to keep watching. Right. I gave Gotham a shot. We were talking about this up before.
Let's talk about Gotham, because I haven't seen it yet. Mostly because I didn't want to see it, because I think the idea of Batman without Batman is ridiculously stupid. Tell me I'm wrong.
I don't think I can tell you you're wrong. Although I'll tell you this. Here's what would have been great about this show, and maybe still can be. James Gordon is probably the most underutilized character in the Batman universe. Like, he is a great character. He has a great story, but he's always playing second or even third fiddle to Batman. Like, so an idea of a show that's about him kind of growing up, I was down for that, totally down for that. But what they're doing so far, it actually could end up being more like the original Batman TV show. It's really shticky. You know, there's all these, like, it's like a little Batman and little Catwoman, little Penguin. And with the exception of the Penguin, they're all kind of, I don't know, they just feel really adorable and sort of.
You don't ever want your supervillains to be adorable. You really don't.
The pilot to Gotham starts with little Catwoman, and she's like got poofy hair and she's crawling around, and it's like, why is she doing that? Why doesn't she walk like a normal person? And it immediately for me set the tone, like, okay, so this is not in a grounded reality, even though they say they want to be. It's all sort of, it's like Joel Schumacher's Batman. That's what it's going to end up being like. And I watched the pilot and was like, you're dead to me. I'm not watching this again. But I was reading, which is how I am. I'm just totally a snob at this point. Probably because I think it has potential, but I don't want to watch a show about how people become. It's like the first 3 Star Wars movies. The problem is we know who they become, so it's much more difficult to sort of make that interesting, the journey. It should have been, you'd think it's possible, but yeah, it's not as interesting. You want new characters and surprises, and the best characters in the new Batman show are, like, I think Fish Mooney, the Jada Pinkett Smith character, is pretty interesting, although she's so close to like a Eartha Kitt crazy that it could easily go too far. And the guy who plays the mob boss, who was on The Wire, he was excellent.
I got to go through some of your bona fides here, because we're going to talk about sci-fi. Star Trek? Do you like Star Trek?
I like J.J. Abrams, the first one, but otherwise, I've watched it, almost all of it. Deep Space Nine would be my sort of bar for Star Trek. Okay, the rest of it just doesn't live up to that.
Actually, lots of geek points for that. What about Firefly?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Okay.
It ended way too soon.
Okay, good. More geek points. Babylon 5. Oh,
are you kidding?
Really?
I'm a huge fan. I'm an enormous fan of Babylon 5.
Okay, well, so what do you think about the rumors of a reboot?
I don't know. I mean, not much. I think I wish more people had seen that show or could see that show. I mean, it is all on, you can buy it, but it sounds really goofy. It sounds like a bad Farscape, and Farscape sounds like a bad Battlestar Galactica, so you're like,
right. But
it's a great show. It's such a fantastic concept. And even in the midst of some not so great acting, it's not.
Could you turn a Babylon 5, so reboot Babylon 5 and do to it what Moore did to Battlestar Galactica, where it becomes darker and grittier and you take out all the shtick and you're just left with pure space opera.
See, I have huge respect for JMS, for J. Michael Straczynski, who created Babylon 5 and wrote most of its, I think, 100 episodes. Just crazy. I honestly, I think it's a very different situation than Battlestar Galactica, where no one's going to say that the original TV show was genius. It had a really great concept and sort of potential for an arc, but then it wasn't really about that. It was, about Starbuck and his hair and things like that. And so I would assume that JMS would be the one rebooting it, so it might be fine. I mean, I think he owns it. I don't think I'm sure there's a production company as well, but it happened on cable a long time ago. I bet that he more or less owns it. I wouldn't be uninterested, but if he's not involved, I'd be pretty skeptical. But I want more people to see the original in a sense, if that makes any sense.
Right. I wasn't a huge Babylon 5 fan until they got to the Shadow arc. I really liked the Shadow arc.
Oh, yeah.
It wouldn't. By far, that's when my attention turned away from Star Trek. I'm like, oh no, it's all about Babylon 5 because this is great writing. When you stepped out of the arcs, it got really campy. And maybe it was just that feel of, okay, everything is computer generated and obviously computer generated and they're just going to gloss over that. But yeah, you're right. I don't think anything in the show was particularly brilliant. I just thought it was a very cool premise.
Yeah, I don't know. Actually, with Babylon 5, I'd say that a lot of the writing, it could, like I said, yeah, I would definitely agree with you. It could get shticky. It could get over. It could get almost arch. But I think there was some really deep spiritual stuff in there. And I'm not sure that JMS is a believer or anything, but and there was some really kind of religious stuff, and there was a lot of references to Tolkien, which he denies. But it's just like, there you want to just say, like, get over yourself. Like, you put rangers in there. You put people who look like elves. Like, come on. Yeah, for me too. Seasons 2, 3, and 4.
Tell me that Zachadum isn't Mordor. I mean, come on. Let's do that.
Yeah. Seasons 2, 3, and 4 of that show are gold. Season 1, it had a different lead who didn't work as well. You kind of need to see it to understand where some things are coming from. And season 5, they weren't supposed to get. So It feels like that. Like, oh my God, what we kind of finished, but we have another season. It's a good problem to have.
But see, that's the difference between that and, say, Battlestar Galactica, because they would have given more another season if you wanted another season. But he told them the story's done. This is all we got. I'm not going to drag this out.
I love that. Have you seen his new show, Outlander?
I have not seen it yet. I've heard it's pretty harsh.
I've heard it's good, but I can't quite get my head around it. Like, I have a friend who really loves it, but I keep saying, like, why do I want to watch a time travel show that's like a romance? Like, where's the sci-fi in that? It's just, yeah, okay, she's in love with two different guys. Like, isn't this a romance novel? Nothing wrong with that, but it feels like it's time travel, for God's sake. Why? Let's do something with that. But
no, she's in love with the same guy, but from two different times. See, that's the twist. You don't see it coming, but I'm telling you, it's there.
Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert.
All right. One last topic. We're actually over time, but I'm having so much fun. Let's talk about comics, because I know you're into comics. There's
I am.
Actually very few Jesuits who are into comics, so we're like a very small club here.
True.
Were you more of a DC guy or more of a Marvel guy?
Oh, that's a good question. X-Men's always been my starting point.
Okay.
So
Definitely
in a lot of ways, Chris Claremont, that's where I started. Although his stuff I find almost unreadable now. I so hate to say that, but I've tried. But when I was growing up, X-Men was always the first. But then as I got older, say like late in high school, that's when DC kind of blew me away. The Dark Knight, V for Vendetta, which I think is DC. Yeah, it is DC. The Watchmen, they're just sort of amazing properties. And so was, I really love this, the Justice League, which was the I'm going to say his name wrong, Keith Giffen, J.M. DeMatteis, Kevin Maguire, sort of comedic take on the Justice League was brilliant. That comic book probably did more to kind of give me a sense of humor, if I have one, than anything, especially the drawing of Kevin Maguire, who I think is just a genius. Now today, if I may just say the rest, I'm almost exclusively a Marvel person. I find there are a couple comics from DC that I like Swamp Thing, or this new book, Grayson, which is about Dick Grayson, kind of as an undercover spy. I actually think that's a really great book. But in general, they rebooted their whole line about 5 years ago, and I just have slowly found it less and less readable, and also kind of, I don't know, just sort of commercial in a way that's not respecting of the characters and story, which probably is the critique you usually hear about Marvel. But I think they're like the indie big, they have the indie sensibility. They have all these great creators who together are creating these great stories with their characters that you're seeing in the movies. Like, lots of cool stuff from the movies comes right from cool stuff that Marvel's been doing for about 15 years in their comic books.
Right. I'm the same way. I'm a Marvel guy. I think the only title that I still read in DC has been Green Lantern, which I'll get mockery for that. But when they did the Ring War arc, Darkest Day, Blackest Night, that whole series was fantastic. I thought it was incredibly well done. And then the reboot I thought was a fumble, but okay. So yeah, I guess I'm mostly a Marvel person. And the funny thing is, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, Jeff Johns, who was the creator that he basically restarted Green Lantern and led to all that Ring War stuff, created all these different rings and groups. I agree with you. I still have all those issues. I'm a huge fan. But when he left, I mean, he was on a little bit too long, and it started to get repetitive, or sort of like just sort of drifting, and he became sort of an executive for DC. But now I gave it up. I was reading all three of the Green Lantern titles, but in the newest reboot, now they have this idea that anytime they use their rings, they're sucking will or hope or whatever out of the universe, and they could destroy the universe. It's like, really, that's I mean, it creates story, but I don't really like it. I don't want them to be like that. So I've given them up.
And unfortunately, I think a lot of people have given up because while Marvel owns the theater, DC is, I guess, trying to make headway in TV shows, be it with Gotham or with The Flash. You've seen the pilot for The Flash, right?
I haven't seen the pilot for The Flash, but I've certainly seen a lot of Arrow, and loved it. Actually, I was sort of scoffing at it for about a year because I watched a little bit of Smallville, wasn't a fan. It felt too like, it's just pretty people and villain of the week. And I assumed Arrow would be the same way, but the critics keep liking it. And that's very unusual for them to take to a superhero show. And so I got to watch a lot of it last summer, I guess. And boy, it's a good show. Actually, I think DC has figured out how to do the comic books. Like, I bet The Flash is going to be an even bigger hit than Arrow. And Marvel, like the first season of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., I mean, I wanted it to be Firefly, but it was rubbish. It was, until the last 7 episodes, it was a complete and total mess. And, I had to fight my way through it. And the new season started really well last Tuesday. I hope that it stays that way, because it should be a great show. But, oh my God, they really screwed it up, in my opinion.
Last question, and that would be the TV show, and you can't name anything that you're working on. Yep. The TV show that you are most anticipating, that you want to see when the pilot comes out.
Yeah, that's another good question.
I know mine.
You've got yours? You tell me yours first.
Mine is Constantine. I want to see Constantine.
Yeah.
I love the comic book. I was really big into it. I have no idea whether or not they'll be able to do it on primetime, but I want to see them at least take a shot.
This is not a nerd show, but the one I'm thinking of, I don't know why it's coming to mind, actually, is Showtime has a new show called The Affair. Have you heard about this show?
The Affair? I don't think so.
I mean, it's like, why does a priest want to watch a show about an affair? But it's the inciting incident is some kind of affair, and then it's how that choice ends up affecting.
Oh yes, no. I have seen. I saw a teaser for that. Okay,
it has a really good cast.
Yeah,
and yeah, if it's just sort of like, how do we get away with it? Then I won't be so, that won't interest me at all. But something about, I don't know. I'm surprised to even be saying it, but something about it.
The priest,
and also the flesh.
The priest side of me, who has done a lot of marriage counseling, is thinking that can't possibly last more than half a season because that spirals really quick. But okay, this is writer land. It's different. I get it. The 11th season of The Affair is going to be the strangest ever.
Like, make a decision already. Jesus Christ.
Well, Jim, we've gone way, way over our time because I've been having so much fun. Thank you again for being on Padre's Corner. Could you please tell our audience where they can find you? So we know that if they want to see what you're doing, they should probably drop by Twitter. So drop by your Twitter account at Pop Culture Priest. That's culture without an E. And they can find exactly what you've been working on, the things that you've been geeking out over. But barring that, where else should they go to find you?
The street corner, probably, in the not too distant future. So I tweet a lot at Pop Culture Priest. I sometimes blog at, I think it's called Gone Walkabout, but I think it's, you guys, crazy. I swear that I didn't know that he was going to ask this, but it's Jim McDermott at blogspot.com. I don't write a lot there. I'm a writer, a freelance writer for America Magazine. So that's the other place you might look. If you go to their In All Things blog, yeah, see, this is a ridiculous post. For my birthday, my mom had all these people send crazy cards, most of the people I didn't even know, and this is me kind of responding to that. But if you go to the In All Things blog at americamagazine.org, I'm often, at least once a week, I'm posting something there. I wrote a thing about a week ago about Shonda Rhimes and Alessandra Stanley. If you know all about that, that's probably the most pop culture-y thing I've written there. But usually it's the Twitter, as we call it.
Yeah, so they need to drop by. What was that for an American Magazine again?
Yeah, it's so American Magazine has a blog called In All Things. I love that you can just do this. So if you go under, if you look on this blog, I write generally once a week on something going on in California, sometimes on pop culture. I've written a bunch of movie and TV reviews for them, all kinds of different stuff.
Fantastic. So you are their touchstone. They find out what's going on in the world by talking to you.
Touchstone, yeah. Yes, I guess.
I got to tell you, it is such a pleasure because every time I see you, we're always going someplace else. We've always got some sort of assignment. And we only seem to bump into each other for 5 minutes. So the fact that I could sit down with you for half an hour and just chew the cud, I'm just tickled pink. Jim, it's a pleasure and an honor to see you again.
Thanks, really, Robert. Thanks for having me, and thanks to your to your viewers and to the chat room guys, the chat room people. I love it.
Yeah, they're good. They're a good bunch of folk.
Yeah, some hilarity. There was definitely some hilarity ensuing. That's what I'd leave it at.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's Father Jim McDermott. Find him at his Twitter account. Find him over on his blog. Find him at America Magazine. And, sir, we thank you for being on Padre's Corner.
Thanks so much.
Now, that means that we've reached the end of our show. I'm sorry, folks. We only get to do 1 hour here every Tuesday night, 7:30 p.m. Pacific time. Be sure to join us again next week when we're going to be having a content creator panel. Hopefully, it will include David Hewitt and Digital Corridor, and I'm trying to find someone else who might want to play with us to talk all about what it means to create content in the new day, be it for screen, TV, the internet, whatever it may be. If you're interested in being a creator, you got to stop by. Don't forget that I'm also found here on the Twit TV network all over. Yeah, you can find me here on Mondays at 2:30 p.m. Pacific time for This Week in Enterprise Tech. I'm going to talk about data centers, switches, networking gear. Basically, anything that connects to anything else is part of our program. On Tuesdays, you'll find me here for Padre's Corner, 7:30 p.m., where I get to talk about culture, technology, pretty much anything that strikes my fancy. On Thursdays, you'll find me twice. Once at 11 o'clock for Know How. It's a show that I do with Brian Burnett, the Cranky Hippo, where we give you some of the projects that we've been working on. If you're a maker, if you're a DIYer, or if you're just a person who likes little tips about Windows and Linux and Mac OS X, you're going to want to drop by. Again, 11 o'clock a.m. Pacific time. And also on Thursdays, 1:30 p.m., you'll find me with Shannon Morse for Coding 101. If you've decided that you want to figure out what all this programming stuff is about, you got to stop by. Don't forget that you can also find me on my show page. Go ahead and drop by twit.tv/Padre. You'll find all of the episodes of Padre's Corner laid out and ready for you to download. You can find every version of every show, and if you click the little drop-down menus, you'll find out how you can subscribe to the RSS feed so you'll get every episode of Padre's Corner automatically downloaded to the device of your choice. And don't forget that if you want to see what I do in between shows, you can always follow me at twitter.com/PadreSJ. That's at PadreSJ. Unfortunately, that's not my Twitter account. I'm not exactly sure what happened. That's actually my YouTube account. But you'll see what I do and what happens in the life of a digital Jesuit. Until next time, I'm Father Robert Balacer. Geek out.